Hi friends, in this video I'm going to be showing you how I process my tomatoes. So the first thing I do is I give them a good wash. Now I don't use any kind of chemicals in my garden, but this is just so that maybe if there's little spider webs or bugs on them, I'm washing those off. As well as while I'm doing this process, I am checking for bad spots and making sure that all of the tomatoes that I am putting into the next phase of this process, as you can see right here, I'm showing you where I found a bad spot. So I'm just going to throw that in the chicken bin. Some of them are okay, so I leave them there so that I can then cut it off and use the rest of the tomato. But these specifically were bad enough to where the chickens were just going to enjoy them. I didn't want to freeze those. So I'm just continuing to go through and wash them and check them all out, make sure that they're good. I'm setting up my workstation. These little, I don't even know, bag holders are so nice. My mom gave these to me, and they hold the bag. In this case, I'm using Ziploc freezer bags. They hold them up really nicely so they're not falling over, and it is wonderful. I very much appreciate these. I use them all the time, even with leftovers and such. They're a huge gift. So I'm just getting my station set up so I have everything that I need. So I have my knife and my cutting board, the bags, and these bag holders, as well as the washed tomatoes right there in the strainer. So the next step is to cut them. Now there's a couple different ways that I cut them. I try to do a bunch of different things so that I use them for different purposes. So these I'm cutting lengthwise, and these are, I think, a Juliet tomato. And they're a little bit bigger than a cherry tomato, but definitely smaller than a slicer tomato. So I'm just cutting them longwise and throwing them in the bag, so I'm halving them. And most of these tomatoes that I'm freezing are really good to use for sauces, and that's mainly how I use tomatoes anyway. Granted, I do fresh tomatoes as well on a salad or with eggs or whatever, but for this purpose, when I'm actually processing the tomatoes to put away, I am putting them away for a sauce. And one of my favorite things to do with them is to put them in a spaghetti sauce, from scratch spaghetti sauce, and it just gives the spaghetti such a rounded flavor and is my favorite thing. So I just do kind of a couple different cuts to try to just experiment. So here I'm closing the bag up. I am leaving a little bit of room because what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of the air out, which is what you see me doing here. I'm trying not to squish them too much, and then I'm going to flatten them out as much as I can and move on to the next bag. So it's really nice to have two of these bag holders because I can set up two of them with the bags in them already and then be able to, I don't know, have a little bit more of an assembly line going on. Once again, I'm getting as much of the air out as I can without squishing the tomatoes. These I actually did halves, so instead of lengthwise, I did them half. And I haven't really noticed any difference, but once again, I'm experimenting with it, and I am trying to figure out what works best for me in how I'm using them. I'm writing the date on them so that I know when they were put in the freezer and when they were processed. Generally, when I picked them off of the vine, I didn't process these the exact same day they came off of the vine. I believe that I processed them, or I picked them a day, maybe 2 days before I actually did this process. Now, here I'm going to be slicing some more slicer tomatoes. And so, once again, because I'm just throwing these in a bag, I am not worried about it looking pretty. I am just getting them into the size chunks, roughly the size of chunks that I want them to be. I'm imagining them in a sauce, and I'm trying to get them relatively the same size. I'm really not that worried about it. When you freeze a tomato, it just completely changes the texture of the tomato. It will never go back to being a similar texture as a ripe raw tomato or a picked off the vine tomato. They become a lot more squishy, the cell walls break down, and it just becomes much better for a sauce tomato. And so that's what my goal, once again, is to put them in sauces mainly, and so that is what I am keeping in mind as I'm processing these. So you can see that I'm just cubing them. Mainly, I'm taking the pit out or the stem, and I'm just slicing them up to the size that I want. Once again, here we go. I'm going to close the bag up, get as much of the air out as I can. And you're gonna see in this one is a lot more juicy because the nature of a slicer tomato has a little bit more juice. It has a little bit more seed and gel. And so you're going to see that represented in the finished product. Now, I had picked a couple more that day that were not fully ripe. And so what I did is I have a southern facing window by my kitchen, and I just put them all along that windowsill, and it does a fantastic job at ripening the tomatoes. And so we had some we were fresh eating, as well as I processed a couple more of these. So here's the finished product. So these are some that I just threw in the bag whole a couple days before I did these other, 7/20/23, so about 7 days before. These are the ones that I did halved vertically, no, whatever that is. And these are the cubed slicer tomatoes. So you see how much more juicy those are than the other more cherry varieties. And these are the ones where I halved the cherry tomatoes.